here is to keep an open channel of communication with your clients about their treatment preferences and experiences. If you find that a client's needs align better with a different therapeutic approach, guide them through the process of finding a suitable specialist. If it is not an option to refer out, then seek supervision or consultation to provide the best treatment possible. Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Janine Wolf, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall. Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, and today I'm delving into an incredibly important yet often controversial topic, knowing when and how to refer a client out. This is a topic that comes up all of the time in my consultation groups. In fact, it came up so often that I attended several trainings on the ethics and considerations when referring out. So let's start with the more obvious factors that we are taught to consider in graduate school. The first point of consideration is clinical competence. I'm talking about those times when a client's needs go beyond your training or specialization. For instance, if a client has symptoms of an eating disorder, but you're not trained in that area, that's a sign you should consider a referral. Or a client's needs have dramatically increased, and as a solo or online provider, you are not able to provide the range of services and support the client now needs. An actionable step you can take here is to build a network for qualified specialists in various fields. You can even schedule meet and greets with these experts, either virtually or in person, to better understand their approach and methodology. Document their contact details and area of expertise in an organized list for quick access when you need it. Then there are urgent cases where immediate intervention is essential, like suicidal ideation or acute psychosis. Here, timeliness is everything, and depending on your setting and your skill set, you might not be able to meet their need. An actionable step is to draft a concrete emergency protocol in your policy and procedure manual for such scenarios. Include steps to be taken, emergency services to be contacted, and create a red flag checklist. Rehearse this with someone you trust so you're not left floundering when a real emergency happens. There is a lot at stake in these situations, so please reach out to your peers for support and consultation. It's also very important to document the situation and the actions you have taken, which we'll get into a little bit more later. Moving on to ethical and legal considerations, suppose you discover a dual relationship with a client, like finding out they're a distant relative at a family gathering or that you go to the same gym as them. It's more than just awkward. It can be an ethical dilemma that requires action. However, therapists in small towns come across this all of the time. So before you switch gyms or take drastic measures, consider having a conversation with your client about what the issue is, your requirement of confidentiality, and how interactions will look if they occur. An actionable step is you want to keep in mind that not all dual relationships are problematic. What is problematic is not addressing the situation with your client so you can make a plan together. It also helps to familiarize yourself with the ethical codes that apply to your license type and state. Create a checklist of guidelines and practice policies and consult it when you find yourself in this type of dilemma. Make sure to document your process and decisions for accountability, and don't hesitate to seek advice from an ethics board or your consultation group. And if the situation ever becomes problematic down the road, you can reassess for referring out at that time. When I've had these conversations, I always try to take it to the next step the client may not think of. I live in a resort town, so there are lots of places locals enjoy for entertainment, relaxation, and days off. Plus, depending on where they live, we might shop at the same grocery store. So this is what the conversation I have with them sounds like. And this is typically during the very first session, regardless of whether or not I'm aware of dual relationships. I just want to address that we live in the same city or close by in an adjacent city, and there might be times that we run into each other, and I want to discuss what that can look like. If you are comfortable saying hello to me, I will say hello back to you, but I probably will limit the interactions I have at that point. If you want to completely ignore me, that will not hurt my feelings. I respect your need for confidentiality, and I will walk away or walk around or whatever I need to do so that there's no chance of interaction. Very often, the clients will say, "Of course, I'm going to say hi to you. I wouldn't want to be rude like that." So the next thing I ask them is, "Okay, so if you say hi to me and you're with a friend, group of friends, or family, and they say, 'Who is that?' Will you feel comfortable saying, 'Oh, that's my therapist?' If not, please ignore me." And a lot of times you can see the lights click on, the glint in their eyes let them know that they're processing this on a deeper level. And that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we are thinking through the scenarios that they can't possibly be able to think about until they've occurred. Now let's talk about a more common factor for referring out. Clients who are not making progress. We have all had those cases where the therapeutic interventions just aren't getting traction. I have found, though, that since the pandemic, many clients are plateauing and not making the type of progress we want to see in our work, despite our best interventions. It's always a good idea to check in with the client and see what they are getting out of therapy. Having regular support for factors in their lives that they cannot change is still providing an important service and a safe space. If you take health insurance, make sure they are still meeting medical necessity. You might also consider updating the treatment plan to address the issues they are experiencing. An actionable step is to perform a clinical audit using your treatment plans and session notes. Have a conversation with your client. Compare the goals set versus the progress made. Based on your findings, decide together or professionally independently whether a change in strategy is needed or if a referral is the better option. Discussing these cases in a consultation group can also bring valuable insights. We also need to look at personal and logistical factors. We've all had those moments when a particular client triggers an emotional response in us. That's countertransference, and it's normal in our work. It can also be a sign to tread cautiously in the best interest of your client or of yourself. An actionable step is you don't want to ignore these feelings. Instead, use them as an area for exploration in your own supervision or consultation group. You might uncover subconscious biases or emotional wounds that are affecting your clinical work. The support and feedback you receive from peers can be really helpful. But keep in mind that as humans who are also therapists, there may be times when you need to refer out due to working with a client whose beliefs or values impinge on some aspect of your identity, your beliefs, or your values. We are trained to be a blank slate and challenge ourselves to move beyond the countertransference and to keep working with the client. And that is certainly a good goal. Still a good idea, but in today's world, most of us are too exhausted to do this. And if it's creating harm for ourselves, we need to be aware of that. It's still a good idea to get consultation around this, but it does not serve the client, yourself, or your other clients if one case is so harmful that it creates extra fatigue or burnout. This work is hard, even with the best fit clients. So you are not truly providing the best treatment for that client or your other clients whose therapy is being impacted by your experience. We need our work to be sustainable and to prevent burnout. Last, but by no means least, we must honor client preference. If a client explicitly asks for a treatment modality you can't provide, it's better to refer them out rather than to attempt something you're not skilled at. Back in the early 90s, when I was in grad school, we were all trained as generalists and saw whoever came in the door. We would seek out resources to learn how to treat different clients. And we didn't have the internet back there, so we had to actually go to the library or purchase a book. But this can be exhausting, and thanks to the many ways we can network with our peers, this may not be the best way to practice. However, we need to keep in mind that in some settings, such as community mental health, some clinicians may have to work with every client that they are assigned. An actionable step here is to keep an open channel of communication with your clients about their treatment preferences and experiences. If you find that a client's needs align better with a different therapeutic approach, guide them through the process of finding a suitable specialist. If it is not an option to refer out, then seek supervision or consultation to provide the best treatment possible. Keep in mind, therapists can have a variety of concerns when it comes to referring out a client. So now I'm going to look at some of those common reasons. Number one, financial concerns. Therapists in private practice may worry about referring out clients. Therapists in private practice may worry that referring out clients will result in a loss of income. This concern can be particularly acute for therapists who are just starting their practice or have a smaller client base. Number two, concerns about reputation. Some therapists may fear that referring a client to another professional implies that they are not competent or versatile enough to handle a broad range of cases. They may worry about how this will impact their reputation, both with clients and within the professional community. Number three, continuity of care. Therapists may have established a strong therapeutic alliance with the client and worry that transferring them to another provider could hinder the client's progress. Number four, the client's reaction. Concern about how the client will react to being referred out is common. The therapist may worry that the client will feel abandoned or rejected, which could potentially result in a breakdown in the therapeutic relationship. So you want to make sure that you handle this the right way so that you can end on a note so that the client feels cared for. Number five, lack of suitable specialists. Especially in smaller communities or more specialized areas of mental health, therapists may be concerned that there isn't a more qualified professional available to take over the client's care. With consultation, you may decide to work with them, but also consider that might make you the referral source for a certain diagnosis or client population. And if you are happy developing that skill set and being the resource for those, that is good. But if it's not something that ideally you want to see a lot of clients with, then you should consider referring out. Number six, administrative hassles. The referral process itself can be cumbersome. It involves paperwork, coordination between different service providers, and ensuring the smooth transition of the client to the new therapist, if possible. Number seven, legal liability. Some therapists may be concerned that if they refer a client who is then dissatisfied with the new provider, there could be repercussions. This could particularly be the case for clients who are dealing with high-stakes issues like custody battles or criminal cases. Thorough documentation is essential. Number nine, emotional attachment. Therapists are humans and may develop an emotional attachment to their clients. Very often we develop that at different levels, and sometimes it's stronger with certain clients than others. The process of referring out a client may evoke feelings of sadness or loss, which can make the process emotionally taxing. Number 10, conflicts with clients, family, or care team. Sometimes family members or other individuals involved in the client's care may resist or oppose the decision to refer out, which can create tension and make the process more complicated. I've seen this most often in my groups for those who are working with children and teens. But keep in mind, there may be potential positive consequences. Number one, it is in the best interest of the client. Ultimately, the decision to refer is often made in the best interest of the client. They may get faster and more effective care from a provider who specializes in treating their specific condition. Number two, professional integrity. Knowing when to refer a client out is an indicator of professional competency and integrity. It shows that you place the client's welfare as well as your own well-being above all else. Number three, network strengthening is another bonus. The act of referring can strengthen your professional network by fostering trust and collaboration between you and the therapist you refer to. So now that we have thought through the decision to refer out, here are some additional steps that you can take. As I have said over and over and will continue to say over and over, consult with peers and supervisors. Before making the final call, get second opinions from your professional network. Peer consultation groups offer a confidential setting where you can get insight into similar cases, the ethical implications, and the emotional nuances that accompany a complex decision like this. Most of the time, you're going to get the emotional support you need as the therapist who's making this decision or dealing with this situation. Number 2, review your clinical notes. Go through your session notes, assessments, and treatment plans meticulously. This step will allow you to ground your decision in objective observations and evaluations. Ensure you've documented key incidents or patterns that support your choice to refer the client. Number 3, use open and honest communication. Choose the right setting and time. Select a session where both you and your client are unlikely to be rushed or distracted. The setting should be secure and confidential, putting the client at ease to absorb and discuss sensitive information. Again, your peer consultation group can come in handy here as you practice what you're going to say to the client and allow yourself to feel more confident in handling this. Number 4, be transparent but tactful. Discuss your observations and concerns openly. Use phrases like, I've noticed that, or it seems like, to introduce your thoughts without making the client feel accused or defensive. Number 5, you may encounter resistance, so be prepared for an emotional response. Understand that resistance is often fueled by emotions. Be prepared for reactions ranging from denial to anger. Validate these feelings by saying something like, it's completely understandable that you're feeling this way, and I'm here to support you in finding the best care possible. Number 6, if possible, provide evidence. If the client questions your decision, offer specific instances or data that led you to this conclusion. For example, if the client's issue is beyond your scope of expertise, you might say, in our last 3 sessions, we focused a lot on X, which is a specialty area for another type of clinician. 7, when you're finally proceeding with the referral, offer choices. Present a list of at least 3 other providers who specialize in the treatment area required. Providing options often eases resistance because it gives the client some control over the next steps and also increases the likelihood of them finding the right therapist. Number 8, be involved in the transition. Discuss how the process will work. This can range from giving the client the referral information to actively coordinating with a new therapist for a smoother transition. With the client's consent, you might offer to send over a treatment summary or even facilitate a joint introductory session with a new therapist. A warm handoff, when possible, can be especially beneficial to the client. If you decide to do a joint session, keep in mind that if you are taking insurance, most likely only one of you will be paid. If you are private pay, then have a conversation with both the client and the other therapist about how payment will be handled with this situation. Number 9, decide if you want to offer to follow up. If so, arrange a check-in either via email or a brief phone call a couple of weeks after the client has had their first session with the new therapist. This offers closure and shows that you still care about their well-being, making the client feel less abandoned. But keep in mind, it may open the door for them to try and bargain to resume their work with you if they were resistant to the referral. As always, documentation and ethics are important. Record the steps you took in making the referral decision, including consultations with peers, discussions with the client, and any information shared during the transition. This is both best practice and a protective measure for future inquiries or legal considerations. We always need to keep in mind that we've worked hard to get our license and we don't want to lose it. You should check with your board or governing body to determine what goes in a psychotherapy note versus what goes in a progress note. I've included a link to a treatment summary sample in the show note, but here's an overview. A thorough discharge summary when referring a client out is an important step that should be approached with attention to detail, confidentiality, and ethical considerations. The discharge summary serves as a final record of the treatment provided and as a useful tool for the new clinician to get up to speed with the client's history and needs. You want to include for the header information the client identification such as their name, date of birth, and any identifying numbers you might use. Date and timing. Clearly indicate the date of the last session and the period during which the treatment took place. Clinical information, you may consider listing the presenting problem, diagnosis or diagnoses, treatment goals, and it can also be helpful to include methodology and interventions used in treatment. Client progress and symptoms, behaviors, and quality of life, challenges and limitations, referral rationale to discontinue treatment, and new provider information if the client gives that information with you. You might also consider some closing remarks, any related attachments, and a confidentiality statement. Of course, you also want to have your signature and credentials. Before sharing the summary, obtain the client's written consent to release this information to the new therapist. Navigating a client referral is especially tough with a resistant client. It can be one of the most complex tasks you'll face in your work. Having a strong support network of peers, such as the community that I run, the Collaboasis clinical consultation groups, can be an invaluable resource in these situations. For everyone listening, there are new episodes of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast released every Thursday on all major platforms. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.